weeks, but for today, we will not be taking any questions or any comments as we proceed. So we did 5 questions. We have a total of 10 questions. We completed 5 questions last week, and we have 5 more. And as I kind of previewed last week, these questions are going to be a little bit more detailed or a little bit more depth than the initial 5. So we'll start with question number 5. Oh, I'm sorry, number 6. Do you feel like young people are valued in church? And if you do, why? If you do not, why not? Anyone want to start? I can start with Logan's comments. All right, Logan White couldn't be here today, but she emailed me. I think I just mentioned that. Emailed me her comments, so I'll start with hers. She said, I think that they're acknowledged, meaning young people are acknowledged from time to time in the church, but not necessarily valued. The only times I really see young people being valued in the church is when they're serving or helping out the older members of the church. Young people seem to only be valued for what they can do for older members rather than what they can do in general or who they are as people. All right. Anyone else?
Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that the church wants to value young people, but maybe doesn't do a good job of actually bringing that to fruition. And what I mean by that is just that there's not a lot of, again, just speaking about here at Westside, not necessarily a generalization, but I feel like here there's not a lot of opportunity for you as a young adult to do things. And I also feel like, as a woman, there really aren't things for me to do either, right? So, like, I can't pray, I can't lead a song, even though I'd really like to, because I feel like I sing really well, but I never get to lead a song. So all of that to say that, like, if you don't get to do things, within this community that you're supposed to be a part of, it's hard to feel valued, right? Like, if everybody has a job that they do that advances the community, then they feel valued. But if you don't necessarily have a job and you just kind of participate, it's difficult to feel valued because you don't really see what your purpose is. And you also then start to feel like, well, if I'm not valued, then like they're not going to miss me when I'm gone. So then what's the point of me continuing to go? Does that make sense? Okay.
I actually agree 100% with that because my personal experience is literally what you said. Considering attending the church after a while, kind of it was just like you said, wondering, why am I doing this? I'm just following the rote methods that my parents set down. And then all of a sudden I had ended up doing the media work and doing the videos and involving myself with the tech aspect of the church and everything. And suddenly it felt like I was contributing more than just filling a seat. And it made me want to actually try and get more involved and do more things. And I guess it is a sense of value attached to that, in that I didn't feel valued before. I just felt like I was just another number for the attendance roster.
Like I agree with what they said. I'm thinking specifically for Westside. I think there is a value, but as long as it fits into a certain mold or box. And if you're kind of outside that certain mold or box, or you're not participating in a way that I guess other people feel like you should participate, then it becomes a problem. And then that's when the criticism arises, and you don't want to kind of participate any longer in said whatever you're doing. And I'm just taking this from a personal aspect. When I graduated from college, I immediately came back, and I was a teacher for like a little while. And I'm laughing because they were like 2, 3, 4 when I was teaching them. But then I became sick, and once I was God bless me, but healed. A lot of people didn't understand that mentally I wasn't there, and they expected me, oh, you're cured now, you need to come back and do what you were doing. And when that didn't happen, there was this big criticism. So it made me pull back even more. And I didn't want to participate anymore because they didn't understand mentally I just wasn't the same. So there's a value, but as long as it's in a box, it feels like sometimes that you do things this way, like I'm doing it. I'm talking like the older people, like we do it this way, you guys got to do it this way. And if it's not that way, there can be like a heavy criticism about it. I don't think it's intentional. I just think that's just how it, plays out. So that's a personal experience for me.
I feel like, wow, it's loud. I feel like we are valued, but we're not involved. Not purposely, but we're here and we're appreciated that we're here. And you look at the younger kids and you're like, wow, they're here. Like, they want to listen, but they just sit there. And I feel like if they do sit there, they're not being involved. And I agree with everything, mostly what Josh has said. Until he started getting involved with things, he enjoyed being here. So you feel like you feel a type of appreciation that they're looking at you and they're like, oh, thanks for being here. Plus you're doing things, not you're just being here and you're just listening.
Question number 7. This is, I'm sorry. Do you feel like young people have a voice in church? Why, if you do, and why not if you don't? I'll start again with Logan's response. It says, normally no young people don't have a voice in church or in the church unless a youth pastor or someone heavily involved with young people at church speak up for them and give them a foot in the door. Most times when young people try to have a voice in the church on their own without an older alliance, they are normally seen as disrespectful, or what they're saying just isn't taken seriously. The concerns and ideas of the youth seem to always be put on a back burner while the older members are made the main priority. Anyone else want to respond?
Okay. Just making sure. I agree with that. A few years ago, I had an experience that really helped me live that out, where an older person talked disparagingly to me because of my thoughts and that I expressed them. So on one hand, I feel like I have a voice, like being the daughter of Joel Armstrong, because, I'll go home and I will have deep conversations with that man. And then he comes and he talks to Lawrence or the other deacons. And then so in that way, I feel like I'm heard. But outside of like this little forum that we're doing, I don't know that I feel heard in any other way. And again, I'm going to harp on the fact that like being a woman in this church is like, I don't know, it's like really depressing. Like it bothers me that I have so much power in my everyday job, right? Like I'm a program manager, I boss people around all day. I hang out with kids, I boss them around all day too. But then I come to church and I can't do nothing. Like that bothers me, and it bothers me a lot. And that's been like one of the reasons why, I've not been coming to Westside as much as I used to, because I go to other churches and I see like how much quote unquote power women have. Like women get to pray, women get to lead songs, women get to play instruments. Like all of that is so encouraging to me and so beautiful to me. But the fact that I don't get to do that here, again, reminds me that I don't really have a voice. And so on one hand, yes, in church, young people have a voice depending on where you go. And then on the other hand, depending on where you go, young people don't have a voice. And I do think that there is a difference between male and female. And I think that needs to be emphasized as well, that like boys will get more of a voice than girls will, especially in a Church of Christ.
I think what Logan said was very true. I feel like we have without Andre, this wouldn't be a thing. We wouldn't be talking. We wouldn't have been expressing our feelings to you guys. You guys wouldn't know any of what we think. So what Logan said is extremely true. Andre was the one who said, this needs to be heard. What you guys think is very important. You guys should be heard. And I think that we in some type of way have a voice, but we have to censor that voice. We have to censor our thoughts. We have to think that we have to think a certain way so you guys would appreciate what we think. Maybe we have to say something we think, but not in the way we want to say it. Maybe not as harsh, maybe not as calm, maybe just in a way for you guys to not judge us and think maybe we're in the wrong, or so you guys don't think we're trying to hurt you. So yeah.
Good job. I think she hit it right on the head right there. Is like, I think, and I'm going specifically for Westside, the young people do have a voice, but if that voice has to be what older people want to hear, if that makes sense. If that's not what they want to hear, then you're in the wrong, and you're going to get a lot of judgment and criticism. So a lot of the kids kind of not say anything. And just taking, again, personal experiences here, I remember a older member like admonishing me for using my phone during service, and this is before everybody was using a Bible app. Now everybody uses that, and it's not even a thought process. But this particular person thought I was on my phone the entire service being disrespectful, and I was using my Bible app. And they were just like, "You're wrong, and you're supposed to be paying attention to God." Well, how did you know I was not? You know what I mean? Like, I think there has to be an expansion of, as technology changes, as times are changing, then the way people have a relationship with Christ is going to look a little different from when you grew up. So, and I think I said this to someone, if I wasn't more spiritually grounded, I don't know if that was the proper word, but if I wasn't more spiritually grounded, that would have been enough for me to walk out and never come back. Right? And that tends to happen a lot over an app that now I see it every Sunday, no matter what church I go to. Somebody has their phone out, they have their iPad out, they're using their things. But I remember an older person just being very harsh in their criticism, because at the time it was new and it wasn't something that, that was a commonplace at the time. So I think we believe that young people have a voice, but in actuality, if it's not what you want to hear, then not really. That's just my personal belief. And I'm specifically here at Westside. I'm doing there. My bad.
Yep. So I feel like young people, we do have a voice, but it's not really our voice. I feel like it's okay, when we want to speak and we just agree with everything, and that's acceptable. But when we have things that we want to speak about, they could be different ideas, and different ideas kind of like contain different things, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's just a difference. So when it comes to changes, there are things that you have to change, and we're kind of like put to the side because of that, because it's not really what we want to hear. Kind of like what Danny said, kind of like what the older people don't want to hear. They kind of like want to stick to tradition, and because of that, if you have a voice and you're saying things like, "Oh yeah, I agree, we should keep it this way," then everything's stays relatively the same. But if we want to go into change, then things have to start being different in here.
I feel like most of the kids that come to church is based on influence. You hear me? Oh. Yeah. Most of the kids that come to church is based on influence of the parents. I feel as though you should give them their own set of mind if they want to come. Because if you notice that it's not a lot of, older kids that come to church. They come, but to a certain extent, like 18, 19, 20, they don't really come to church by themselves when they start driving. You know what I mean? And I do agree with them. Sometimes when I come to an adult class after I finish, graduating from the teenage class, sometimes I do be scared to, say stuff, because I don't know if you understand, or I might say the wrong things far as criticism. So.
All right, the next question is church a place where you see Jesus' message lived out in its members? Why, if you believe that is the case, or why not? Okay. Is church a place where you see Jesus' message lived out in its members? Why or why not?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you think God's message is. Personally, I believe God's message is to love everyone, show that you love them, receive the love, give love to God. And I don't think that's a good perception if you think about everything the church isn't loving. If you're not loving the LGBT community, if you're not loving illegal immigrants, if you're not loving the Black community, if you're not loving certain things that we're supposed to be supporting and loving, it's really hard. That's like, it's what pushes away the younger members, because they grow up thinking this is wrong. You shouldn't put people down if you want to love them. You have to learn and grow and love everyone like the Bible tells you to.
I feel like Jesus' message, we do see it lived out in its members, but only on Sundays. Because when we think of Sundays, we think, oh, this is a day, we all come together, we talk about God, we worship God, right? But in reality, it's supposed to be, in our life every day, and we have to use that every day. And, you don't really see everybody thinking about God 24/7 on a daily basis, because most people just think, oh, it's Sunday, and that's when we think about God. But we should be, doing what we do here and acting that out there, and it shouldn't be, restricted to this area.
Again, I'm personally for Westside. I'm looking straight at Westside. Do you see Jesus' message lived out in its members? Yes, when we're dealing with one another as church members, not necessarily when we're dealing with the community at large. Even when dealing with like our ministries with the homeless and literacy, sometimes I feel like we could do a better job of showing Jesus' message to those who we don't necessarily agree with. And she routed off a whole list: LGBTQ, black folks, brown folks, people that are completely different. And at Westside, I think we fool ourselves into believing that we do it well because we're such a diverse church. But it's not really happening. So we do it with each other. But as the community as a large, I think we're struggling with that. And that's why we don't see a lot of young people kind of coming and staying and being around. So again, I've been at this church since I was 7. This is just another personal story that I experienced. Around 11 years old, we had a congregational meeting, and I never forgot this. We were talking about feeding the homeless in a pretty rough area in Baltimore City. And a former member got up and was like, well, we have to be careful because there's a bunch of murderers and rapists and drug addicts and blah, 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 blah. And I heard half the church go, and the other half were like shaking their head and agreeing. And then I'm just like, read from the Bible, even at 11. I'm like, well, didn't Jesus hang out with some murderers and wasn't he around some not so keen people of the society and people that had blood disorders and things of that nature? So why would we think, if we're Christians, Christ followers, right? Why wouldn't we be doing the same thing? Why wouldn't we reach out to the community? And I remember at 11, just thinking like, wow, why would he think that's okay to just say and be all right to just say? And so I quickly learned a quick lesson that certain people in the congregation feel a certain way, and it not necessarily coincides with Christ's message. So sometimes I think it happens, but not a lot. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just thought about something. I think it was maybe Thursday. I was in class, and our teacher had been frustrated about something happening in her personal life. She had a second job in a gym, and she told the class, I quit because they hired a new man and he's a complete racist. And I am disgusted by all races and I can't be near them. So if you think about it, if the church is, for say, they don't like something, perspective, and someone is just disgusted by the fact that you could hate something when you're supposed to be loving something. You're supposed to do the exact opposite in the house of God, which is supposed to love. You're supposed to love. And if you're hating on it, it's really bad and it's pushing away. So imagine my teacher is the young people. You're disgusted by the fact that someone could hate someone. So you hate them and then you just push away from the church.
I agree with all the things that have been said. They've been very good. And I just want to kind of harp on the idea that I think it's okay to disagree with things, right? So if you disagree with LGBTQ rights, fine. If you disagree with undocumented immigrants coming up over the border, fine. If you disagree with helping the homeless because they are, rapists, murderers, drug addicts, whatever it is that you disagree with, I think that you also need to be respectful and responsible enough to say, I disagree with this, but that doesn't make you any less of a human. That doesn't make me any less of a Christian. And I'm still going to do what I'm supposed to do, which means I'm going to love you and treat you as if I love you, right? Yes, I am for all of those things. In my current job, that is what I do. I fight for people. I ensure that they get to live this American dream. Like, that is my job. So there's no room for me to say, like, I disagree with this, and so I'm also not going to help you. What I've learned in this job is that they are human beings. All of them are humans. So it is important that as we are living out Jesus's message, we remember that everybody is a human, that we don't have to agree with everything that everybody believes. That's not necessary. But what is necessary is that you love other people and that you welcome people with open arms, again, regardless of how you feel about how they live their life, what they think, anything. Like, all of that goes to the side when you remember that Jesus loved everybody. He didn't put certain people into a box. Like, he didn't put the thieves in a box and was like, I'm not going to love you because you're a thief. He loved them too.
I agree completely with that, and think that that's the part of the biggest problem, is the fact that people seem to tend to put a difference between, disagreeing with something and believing that that's the way it is and can't change. Because I say, I know there's sermons, I've heard sermons, I've talked with people. It's like you disagree with something, but you won't hear, once you disagree, that's your opinion, and you won't hear any other statement to the contrary, and you stick to it. Whereas, like Kalita said, you can disagree with something and accept that fact, but still listen to something or change your opinion down the line, or still do something about it. You don't have to just sit there and then just cast that person or thing off.
There are a lot of things up here that I definitely agree with. It has to do with a lot of people not listening necessarily to, as you were saying, different opinions, different lifestyles. There have been several times that a friend of mine has been disrespected because of their sexual orientation. It's a problem that I see a lot, not just in the world period, but there have been like Christians that have turned them down or might talk behind their back because their lifestyle isn't in agreement with theirs. That's
Just one other thing that I was thinking about. So I am taking this class at a church near my job, and it's called Race Literacy 101. And essentially it goes, we're learning about like what race is, what is racism, how do you combat that, all of those kinds of things. And what really struck me as interesting is that like this church was doing this class that didn't have like the teacher brings in Bible verses, but essentially it doesn't have anything to do with being a Christian necessarily. It has something to do with like being well learned and like being able to put like your ignorance to the side and be open to the fact that there are things that you don't know that in order to be a better Christian, you should know. So like that kind of brings me back to this, because I feel like, one thing that really could be beneficial for Westside is classes like this, like not just Bible classes, but classes that are like for social edification as well, right? Like there are things that I'm even learning in this class that I didn't know. So just like a next step kind of thing.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, like we get Jesus's message. We all understand, and I'm speaking specifically to us as a family. We all understand that Jesus died for us, right? But in the scriptures, it says that Jesus died for everyone, and that's a laundry list of things that we don't care for. That's a laundry list of it. Okay. So my when I say, do we see Jesus' message lived out? Not necessarily all the time, because our personal opinions about just things that we find offensive or we're not used to can impact how we view Jesus' message overall. And we're bringing our own personal nonsense into what Jesus never had in the first place, because again, that goes back to when he died on the cross. All of that stuff was torn down. All those walls, all those bridges, all those things and bricks. And when we do that inside of the church, we'll just build in those chains and we're building that bondage back up. Okay? So like, if we treat people who were in jail, we kind of turn our nose up at them. Just remember that Christ was in jail and he was not guilty. And he was murdered for it. And there are a lot of people that are in prison that's like that. So everything we have to look at Christ as the center of it. And if we're treating people in this, while we're harping on this one, I think because we see how the church within itself treats the LGBTQ community, we see how they treat the black community, we see how they treat the brown and immigrant community, and it's at the forefront. The church should be at the forefront, but it's not, because they want somebody in here said it to me, I don't know who it was and I might misquote it, but a lot of people use church as the means to how they want their society to look. And you can't do that, because again, Christ died for everyone. So we have to be able to reach out to those people. And specifically, I understand what this brother is talking about, because there was an LGBTQ, and I know how certain people feel about Danny. Danny is not a part of the LGBTQ community, but I ride hard for them because I have a lot of friends who are LGBTQ, and I see how the church treats certain members. There were young people that were here that refused to walk back through this door because of specifically how this church treated them. And we have to accept that. We have to look in the mirror and accept that for real. And that's why they're not coming back. Okay? And then understanding that what they do, that's between them and God. All we can do is continue to teach God's messages. Make sure that that seed is there and let God do the growing. But we can't do that if we're treating them not like humans. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what's happening. And not just Westside, it's the church as a whole. The church as a whole is just not treating people like human beings. Okay? So I just want to harp that point. Like, we get what Jesus is talking about. We know what he's about. We know that God is love. That's not being dismissed. But at the same time, we're not using that love to show it to other people. And that's just flat out wrong. And the word that I hear a lot from non-church goers is the church is filled with a bunch of hypocrites and a bunch of bigots. I hear it 24/7. And at the time, I'm like, no, that's not true. And then I look back and I reflect, well, maybe there's a hint of truth to that. So that I just want to make sure that point is across. And you might not agree, but the fact is the reality. That's the reality of the situation. That's why a lot of young people are not gonna come back until we make some personal changes in how we reach out to folks and how we communicate with those folks. And then knowing that God is the ultimate, he's the author of everything, and he will handle that. It's not for us to judge or criticize, but to love. I think that's what we're just trying to point out. I'm sorry.
No, you good. That's okay. That's okay. Anyone else want to? Anyone else want to add to that? I'm gonna shorten up my daughter's message here. She says that, and to read the questioning in case some people forgot, is the church a place where you see Jesus' message lived out in its members? Why or why not? And I'll read some of her response. She said, there are, of course, some members that do fully portray Jesus' message while not trying to hide the fact that they're human and not shaming others for being human. But she does mention that she does see kind of a stereotypical parts of Jesus' message lived out, the parts that people subconsciously use as a bare minimum of being a Christian, like not cursing at church or participating in services and activities outside of Sunday service, praying for people, etc., and advising others in the church to do the same. However, there are some that she sees involve themselves in judging others, other church members, lying, gossiping, and being hypocritical in some cases. So that's some of she sees both. She sees some that definitely betray, and then others there's some difficulty there. Any others want to jump in? Okay. All right. The next question is, do you believe that our church is committed to young people? Why or why not?
All right. Actually, I'm just gonna be generalized on this one. I don't think really any church is, or rather, I'll say I don't think any church understands how they need to deal with it. Like, you and Tom are doing this Bible study presentation now, and like everyone said, we're starting to address some of the things that we've noticed, we've seen as different age ranges for the young community here. But like Lita, I've been to a couple different places. I've talked with people who go to church, who have faith in God, but don't go to church, all kinds of different stuff. And it goes back to kind of the earlier questions we had done last week, where they all feel ostracized for what they may think, what they may believe, or how they may act. And there's not really enough of any way to, I'll say, mitigate that. More so where it's like everyone's opinion seems to come out, whether or not they mean it intentionally. It's like Lita said last time, your prejudice is a bit too strong of a word that I want to use, but your opinions on this person's personality or their lifestyle or whatever seem to temper your beliefs or your attempt to try and reach them, where they just kind of feel like, I'm going to just sit back and just not say anything. I'm going to listen. I'm not going to assert my presence so you guys can kind of just forget about me and then I'll leave.
I think that Westside wants to be committed to young people. I'm not sure everybody's ready to get uncomfortable. I'm not sure everybody's ready to get down and dirty. Like, cause that's what we're talking about, right? Like, in order for there to be change, you have to be willing to cry, to hurt, to be completely raw with other people. And then you can grow, then you can make changes. But until we get to that kind of a place, I'm not sure we are committed. Because like I said last week, things that don't change get left in the past. They become obsolete. They don't work. They don't work, right? Like, you think about bring back my analogy from last week. You think about phones that you had, back in 1995, and they don't stand up to a phone that you get in 2019. It just doesn't happen. So it's the same idea with the church. If a church is still stuck in 1995, they're not going to work in 2019. We're talking about everything's different, but we're talking about, the age of communication, the fact that, for me, one thing that I find to be kind of difficult to deal with is just that, a lot of things will happen in the world. And I feel like we don't do a lot to really bring those things into the fold. Sorry. As in, like, when the New Zealand attack happened, right? When that terrorist murdered people, I feel like, there should have been more from us, right? Going out to the community saying, like, we love you. Like, what I did after that happened was I went to a mosque and I prayed. I texted, I called every single one of my friends who are Muslim, and I ensured them that that person was not indicative of what I consider to be a Christian, or not indicative of what I consider to be, the white race, right? That I went to them and I let them know that I know people who will ride or die for you. And I think that that's what our church needs. Like, if you're going to say that you are committed to young people, you must ride or die for young people and their ideas. Because if you're not, again, you become obsolete. If you are stuck in the past, you cannot move forward. And so, yes, Westside is committed to young people. But again, I'm not sure that we're ready.
Okay, so is Westside committed to young people? Yes. And we've made, in the past, very valiant efforts to always include the young. I remember for years we had the lock-ins at the church. Well, there were a lot of activities, and then the young men got to serve. But the problem was that the young men served, and the young ladies in the church had nothing to do. So that was an issue to me, because everything was put on them, and they got to serve on Sunday and lead the whole service for a Sunday. But then the young women kind of were just, left by the wayside. So I think Westside definitely has shown in the past that they're dedicated to young people. I'm just not sure in the future how we can grow from here, because I think Andre said it, we are on the verge of dying out, because after your generation there's not really a lot of us here, and then who do we have left to carry on the torch? So I think we just need to figure out a way we can get more young people involved. I think Westside, just my personal opinion, I think we really do want the church wants to be committed. I just think we don't really know how to move on from here. I think that is it.
I feel like when it comes to this church, Westside, being committed to the young people, I feel like we want to be committed, So I feel like Westside wants to be committed because, we're acknowledged a lot. I do hear on the regular, oh, the young people, they're the future of the church. But I feel like we're not really being prepared to be the future of the church. And I feel like that's the problem right there.
I also think that Westside wants to be committed to young people more than it is. From my experience from the past, like Danny was saying, we had things like the lock-in, we had things like the men doing the services, we had things like we had the youth chorus for a short period of time. There are a lot of different things that the church has tried to do, but necessarily hasn't hit the mark with the young people. So maybe I guess the collaboration needs to be talked about.
Anyone else? Okay. And this is last question. Kind of already touched on it with one of the earlier questions. Says, do you think that the church's feelings about the community around them cause the young people to not feel comfortable about attending? You need me to say it again? All right. Do you think the church's feelings about the community around them, meaning outside of Westside, in this case, around them, cause them, the young people, not to feel comfortable about attending?
I think that this is true, that many young adults or teenagers don't come to church because of the fact that the way the church views or treats the community around them. There are multiple communities, or like the homeless or the poor, and that everything everyone's been saying really adds up to this one question. Our view as a church on the communities around us really affects the way that people who want to join say, oh, let me not come to Westside. Let me go to this other church. Try this church. And maybe if that church doesn't work, have the same opinions just like Westside. Let me go to this church and this church until where they're like, all churches are the same. Let me not go to church at all. And that's what keeps them away. And if they're not going to church, then their generations aren't going to church either. We die out, and the only people who want to stay in church aren't being appreciated. They're going to end up leaving too. Nothing's going to keep them here other than the fact that we were raised here, that this is our home, when actually church is anywhere. Church is the people, not the place. Church can be a backyard, a closet, a room. Church is the people, and if the people aren't together, then there's no church.
I agree with the last question because it was one point where I think I was younger. I was like, what am I going to wear to church? I feel I do agree with the last question because it was one point in my life when I was younger and I would think, what am I going to wear to church? I'm really not the type of girl, to wear dresses every Sunday. But sometimes older adults will have criticism based on what you wear. So I feel as if sometimes that can draw, our age group away because what we have to wear coming to church. Like a suit, tie, dress pants, dresses, and criticism. Criticism is the biggest part too. So
I also agree with this last question in the sense that that I think that most young people, again, generalizing, but maybe this is wrong, but I feel like most young people feel oppressed when they come to church, right? Like, talking about what she's saying. So if you have to dress a certain way, like, what's the point in coming to church if I can't dress how I want, if I can't be comfortable the way, that I dress? Like, and so I'm not saying like booty shorts and things like that. But what I am saying is that if a person is more comfortable in shorts versus a skirt, or if a person is more comfortable in pants than a dress, then like that should be acceptable. I mean, in general, right? Like, so I find that, the church can be pretty oppressive. And I feel like that's not what it's supposed to be. Like, I feel like that's not what Jesus was going for. Like, I'm pretty sure he wasn't like, I want everybody to feel, like they can't do anything when they come to church, or they can't be their truest, most honest self when they come to church. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not what he meant. So the fact that that is where we are, where people both feel like they're being oppressed, but then they also feel like people are hypocrites, right? Like, so maybe to your face, they're like, oh, that's a cute outfit. And then they go talk to somebody else and they're like, man, I wish Khalida would stop wearing jeans to church because that's not what Jesus wants. So then there's that, right? Like you feel oppressed, but then you also feel like nobody's on your side. Like the whole going back to like the empathizing thing, right? That like people don't understand that it's okay to be different. Like, and that feels weird coming out of my mouth because I'm like, the whole, like, what makes us beautiful is the fact that we are different. And so if we're going to a church that doesn't bring that difference to the forefront, right, doesn't like shine a spotlight on that difference and say like, this is what we're looking for. Like, we are looking for everybody to be different so that we can, make the world a better place because we are accepting of each other's differences, then
Okay. I also want to say, actually, I want to confirm we're on question 10, right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I had to go to the bathroom. Yeah, I agree with the question, and I think a lot of it also goes back to pretty much everything you, Khalida, have said on every question about your activism, where that's a big part of it, where you go out and if anybody doesn't know, you have pictures of you traveling to all different countries, talking to all kinds of different people with everything. And a lot of that can go a large way to helping people become comfortable and feel like they have a purpose attending and doing things. So it's kind of a thing of, I guess, your activism where we should be going out and talking with other people, accepting the fact that things are different, and that's not necessarily a reason for you to be ostracized.
Okay, so real quickly, I kind of have a personal feeling about this. So I'm pretty sure y'all heard, but at the school I teach at this week, we had a stabbing there, right? So of course on the news, it was all about how these kids are violent, blah, 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 blah. And me working there, I know exactly like that's not how the school is. There's a lot of great things going on. They never mentioned any of the great things that we had going on in our school. It was just the most negative thing they could find. And then they just characterized the whole school. I think that happens a lot with the church, with communities. They take a few examples of a few people from those communities and they kind of generalize the whole community. And I was really I was really angry about it because I'm just like, man, we just went to the state championship. You know, we have a JROTC. They just won first place. Well, you know, my band did well this year. Like, we got all this great stuff going on out of school. And the only thing they could do is talk about this kid who went all the way left and stabbed another kid. And come to find out, it was a case of bullying that went to the extreme. Right. So just in the news this whole week, it's just been how that's a bad school. Those kids are bad. They're awful. And they represent the whole community of Baltimore. And I feel like sometimes the church looks at the entire certain communities the same way. So if you feel like the church is looking at your community that way, you won't be kind of apt to come at all. You won't feel comfortable to come here. So I kind of feel where that's a really great question, and I feel where that's coming from.
One really quick thing. Sorry, it's gonna be long probably. So something about dressing. I just want to say that in the Bible, it never says dress to impress for Jesus. It says comes to church. We're supposed to come to church, love Jesus, and show his love, not by the way we dress. I remember one day Lawrence was teaching the young class, and then he showed us a video. Yeah, it showed us a video of this man who looked like a cholo. If you don't know what that is, it's like a Hispanic gang member. And then the video was Pop Lock and Drop for Jesus. And it was really amazing because he looked really wrong, but he was right for the church because that's what diversity is.
Okay. Thank you guys for your comments. As a kind of preface, today was going to be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more raw, and I appreciate your open heart in receiving what they had to share. We intend on taking this information along with other things to try to formulate some solutions. So this, I mentioned it last week. No right or wrong here. It was just their raw feelings. Again, I appreciate you guys accepting what they had to share. And in a few more weeks, we'll give the class an opportunity to talk to young people and ask questions. So we're going to close out so we can get the service started. Can I have somebody to just quickly close us out in prayer?
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to hear from the young people. Help us to change our ways and adapt as we need to. And we pray we can do this to your glory. In Christ's name, amen.